Can you hear me back? Yeah, you can hear me. Yay! So when I came to this place, I saw the old bar. I was all prepared for an orgasm. They ended up with sliders. You know, I thought this whole aging thing was going to take a lot longer. Frankly, I would much rather deal with pimples than arthritis. Every day is like day when you're my age. You know, I went to the doctor because I wasn't feeling well, right? So my knees were hurting, my hips were hurting, my shoulder, everything was just killing me. So he takes x-rays and puts the x-rays up on the board, and there's all white spots. And the doctor says, do you know what this is? I said, if I knew what it was, I wouldn't come to see you. I said, so let me take a shot. Bone cancer? He says, no, it's arthritis. He says, now I understand why you're in pain all the time. He says, you got it from head to toe. Arthritis makes everything stiff. Not everything. You know, when I was a kid, I used to like getting buzzed with my friends. You know, smoke a couple of joints, some beers, put some Led Zeppelin on, and we'd have a great time. I've been trying to recapture that now for years. And it occurs to me, all I really have to do is stand up real fast, and my blood pressure takes over. You know, there's 4 rules to aging. You never pass up a bathroom. You never waste an erection. You never trust a fart. And never, ever, ever get on the floor without a specific plan to get back up. You know, when you guys can say I got a few tattoos. So my wife drops me off. I go get another tattoo, and I come home, and we're sitting in the back. And she looks, she goes, what did you do? I said, what? She goes, why'd you get that tattoo around your knee? I said, well, I got these lines around my knee because remember when the kids were young, we would measure their growth on the door jamb. She says, yeah, I get that, but I don't get these 3 lines around your knee. I said, well, to be perfectly honest with you, I'm really trying to measure the impact of gravity on my balls. She says, why the dotted line? I said, well, at that point, I have to stop wearing shorts. You know you're getting old when your balls are longer than a CVS receipt. You know, we've been married for 41 years. This cane is annoying. We've been married for 41 years, and you know, one of the only reasons why I do this is because this is the only place I could actually get 5 minutes of uninterrupted time. You know, when we got married, unlike today where kids write their vows, you know, everything's very special. It's all bullshit. Anyway, we did the very traditional vows, right? So I really nailed her on that whole in sickness and health clause because she's been through like 20 orthopedic surgeries. And speaking of that, I'm looking for a way to make a little extra money. So I'm looking at different business models. And one of the business models I'm looking at is OnlyFans. Now, because I've had so many orthopedic surgeries, and a lot of people my age have had many orthopedic surgeries, I'm starting up a pay site for just people who have had multiple orthopedic surgeries, and I'm calling it Only Scars. You know, we were talking with some cousins, and we were talking about, well, you know, I'm not in great health, and obviously I think I'm the one that's going to go first. So we were talking about that with my cousins, and I said, you know, I always tell her, I'm definitely going first. And she says, yeah, that sounds about right. But my cousin said, well, what if she went first? I said, well, I would probably follow very quickly. He says, oh, you'd be brokenhearted? She jumps in and says, brokenhearted? He wouldn't be able to get out of his fucking recliner to feed himself. You know, she's like a fresh cannoli, my pixie. She smells great. She tastes delicious. But like too many cannolis, she's killing me slowly. You know, got a lot of married people in here. Looks like there's a few married people. Have you? Well, only Mark. The rest of you are either hooking up or you're gay. So have you ever tried to win an argument with a spouse or a significant other? The likelihood is you'll run out of oxygen before you get to make a single point. And so at the end of the argument, I always apologize because I like living indoors. You know, and she accuses me all the time of having selective memory. I forget things, she claims. My head is so full of shit, I only have limited amount of space for things that I deem are important. And so, yeah, there's a lot of stuff that I just don't pay attention to. She accuses me of having early onset Alzheimer's. And I tell her, I don't. I said, I have Italian Alzheimer's. I forget everything but the grudges. You guys must be Italian. You're laughing at Italian stuff. You know, when Pixie was going through menopause, it was a difficult time. I like to call it the thermostat wars. We would spend time running back and forth to the thermostat, right? I put it at 75, she put it at 62. We went in the bedroom one night and there were intermittent snow flurries. It was terrible. And I said to her, I said, what is this menopause really like? I said, I just don't get it. She says, well, I feel like I'm burning from the inside out. I said, oh, I get it. It's like when I have a very spicy Italian meal. I woke up 10 minutes later and she was standing over me with the frying pan. You know, I grew up in the 70s, like you couldn't tell. I grew up in the 70s and it was a really, really different time. You know, there were no cell phones, right? So, no cell phones, no pictures, no documentation. I must have my thumb on. No documentation. And thank God, because literally everything we did could have turned into an indictment. We did very different things than guys now, right? When I was a kid, we went to strip clubs, we drank scotch, we smoked Marlboro Reds. Now guys go to kava bars. You know what these are, kava bars? They go to kava bars, they drink kombucha, they roll little joints with filters on them. Filters! And they sit around and they talk about their feelings. We didn't have feelings. We had cocaine, but we didn't have feelings. And what happened to pubic hair? There's no more pubic hair. The shag is gone. Everything is hardwood. When I was a young man, you had to be very, very intrepid to muff dive. There was a very specific technique. Muff dive? Muff dive. There was a very specific technique. Watch. You sort of want to get those loose hairs out of the way so you're not choking. And now, because of menopause, it's very different. You do the same blow, but it's to get the cobwebs out. It's sort of like one of those 80 Nintendo game cartridges. Thanks. I wanted to make a little extra money, so I decided I'm going to drive Uber. So I get a call, pick up in Sarasota, I pull up and it's a nun. Okay. Sister gets in the car and, you know, I'm looking back at sister's looking up at me and she says, why do you keep staring at me? I said, well, sister, I'm a Catholic schoolboy and I gotta tell you, I always had a fantasy about making out with a nun. Sister says, if you're single and you're Catholic, I'll make out with you. I said, hey, lucky me, I'm both. So we pull over, I get in the back, sister and I are making out. She's kissing me like a drunk girl on prom night. Anyway, we finish up, I get in the front of the car and again, we're looking at each other. And I said to sister, sister, I have to tell you, I have a confession to make. I'm actually married and I'm Jewish. Sister says, it's okay, sweetie, my name is Kevin and I'm on my way to a Halloween party. You know that one? That's one of my favorite street jokes. I'm up in New York and my little nephew wants to go for ice cream. So he jumps in the car, we're driving for ice cream. And if you know anything about driving in New York, inevitably you end up behind a garbage truck. So we're behind a garbage truck hits one of those giant New York potholes. Garbage comes flying out and this giant dildo flies and smashes into the windshield. My little nephew's like dumbfounded, he's looking at me. And I said to him, Matt, I don't want to have an embarrassing conversation. I said, Matt, don't worry about it, it was just a bug. He looks me dead behind, he goes, Uncle Rocky, how does a bug fly with a dick that big? I think that's about all I got for you guys for now. I'll look and see what I got in my phone. Maybe I got a little bit more. All right. be nice and kind to your bartenders. Please take care of them. And thanks to the old bar for having this for us tonight. Jake?